friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop. It's 7:30 a.m. on Monday morning, May 4th. Today is the Apprentice Caleb's first day in the shop. I don't know if this is going to work out or not. We've already discussed that in a previous video. But assuming he shows up on time, and he should because he's living in the rental apartment that I have, so he's only got a short walk to work. But assuming he shows up on time and gets off on the right foot, then here's what I plan to show him for his very first repair. So more or less, as bluntly as I can, I'm just going to say, okay, here's your first project, fix this. And I'm just going to say it kind of pan-face and, like I'm serious, And I am actually serious, believe it or not. This is really going to be his first project. But I'm going to try to get his expression caught on camera if I can. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. If the camera's on and he notices that it's on, I don't know. But I'm going to try to have the camera on and more or less, bring him over in front of the camera and then hand him this and say, okay, here's the first thing I want you to fix. And we'll just see what his expression is. I have no idea what this is going to turn out like. Bear with me, here we go. Well, friends, I told you we were going to have a new addition to the Rosa String Works business here, and we have Caleb this morning. He's just going to be starting out. Say hello to the folks, Caleb.
Hi, everybody.
We're anxious to get started, and I've got all kinds of work piled up that I'm going to present to him. And in fact, I've got his very first project right here. I want you to fix this first, right here.
Simple enough.
This is he thinks I'm kidding, but this really is his first project. And, I figure this project, believe it or not, as complicated as it is, believe it or not, I really think this will give him a lot of confidence to get this thing fixed. You're going to have to do everything on this. It's going to be repair, it's going to be set up, it's going to be even like building an instrument in a lot of ways, because this particular thing is broke so badly that I don't think we're going to be able to just simply glue it back together like you've seen me do. And it's broken almost straight off. So you're basically gluing end grain to end grain, and that ain't going to work. So this is going to require a scarf joint. We're going to have to measure angles to get everything right and fix this. So he's got his work cut out on him for the very first project, and that's this guitar here. And this is just a cheap guitar. It's an Austin off-brand type guitar. It doesn't belong to anyone other than the shop. So it's a good one to start on, good one to get your feet wet with. You think you can handle it?
Yeah, I think I got it.
We'll see. We've been thinking about the order of operations because on a big job like this, order of operations is one of the most important things to consider. In other words, if you do something before you do something else, it could impact the overall project. You want to try to do them in the correct order. So what we're thinking about here first, obviously there's some little things that we'll have to do first, like we're going to take the tuning keys off and things like that. In terms of the actual repair, I think one of the first things we're thinking about doing is just gluing it back together temporarily, if you will, to hold it in place just like it is. Because that gives us our best chance of getting everything in alignment, getting the proper angles, the fretboard flat, getting that proper angle on the peg head. So if we try to glue it back just like it is, that'll get us most of that. And we may even have to tweak that a little bit. But then once we get that, then after we've got it, because this is so messed up, I think then cut a scarf joint or maybe splines or whatever we decide we need to do on the back side of this and repair it that way. One of the negatives on this is that it has such a large truss rod. It's a great big square bulky truss rod, which is probably realistically one of the reasons it broke. I mean, it looks like it was major trauma that actually broke it, but on the other hand, that's the weakest part right there, because you got the narrowest part of the neck and you got this great big block of junk sitting in that little tiny narrow spot of the neck. So it was very weak in that area, and I'm sure that that contributed to this breaking in half. Caleb, you got your work cut out for you. He didn't flinch. He said he could do it, so we're going to see how it goes. You got an order of operations? There you go, my man.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
So we decided that the big truss rod was going to be a problem for gluing it back on. We wouldn't have enough strength in the wood. So what we're going to do now is take the fretboard off with our little heating element. And we're going to take the truss rod out and put a smaller one in. So Jerry and I have been working on this for the better part of almost 2 hours now. And we're having a heck of a time getting this thing off. I think we've decided that they've used some kind of different glue on here. We've had to actually turn up the heater almost 425 degrees. Still having a really hard time getting the fretboard off, but we're about halfway there, and I'm going to keep working and see where we get. So I've just about got the fretboard off, and I thought I'd turn the hammer back on so you could see. It's taken quite some time, and turning the heat up seemed to help quite a bit. I think I might be done with that. Been real tough, but I think we're just about got her off. Maybe one more push ought to do it. It's been quite the pain to get off. Fretboard's off, and it took a little bit of wood with it. But to give you an idea how long that took, we started about 9:30 and it's going on noon. And I think I'm going to take a break and come back and figure out how to take this truss rod out. So with a little heat and a little persuasion from the hammer, we got the truss rod out. Now I'm going to start gluing in some of the chips that came out, like this one that came out with the fretboard, and start gluing up the kind of splintered ends. And we're going to do that on both the neck and the headstock side and give that some time to dry before we reattach them. So I'm going to paint in some glue and get some good coverage and clamp it up. I've started clamping up where I've put glue in. I got the headstock a little clamped up. We're going to try to get all the little holes closed up and all the pieces that came off. And while I'm waiting on that to dry, I've started cleaning up the fretboard with a chisel. So as you can see, I'm trying to take some of the excess glue off from when we took it off. That way it'll go on a little easier and a whole lot cleaner, because we don't need all this extra glue. So I'm just being real careful to chip the glue off, not take any wood. You can see all the glue and the little white flakes. Well, I'm not sure if you can, but there's a nice strip of glue where the truss rod was. It made it kind of obvious they glued the truss rod in. It made it real difficult to get it out, but this is what I'm going to do for a while. So I'm getting ready to put the headstock back on, and I've got some glue on the neck side, and I'm getting ready to spread some on the head side. Just wanting to keep in mind that this is not all we're doing for strength on this. We do plan on putting on some form of scarf joint to help keep it together. Not just going to put some glue on there and call it. Just want to make sure I got glue in all the little crevices and then get it clamped up good and tight. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what I've done. Well, this is where I leave it for now. It's clamped up nice and tight, and we should have a headstock attached as soon as it dries. So I'm leaving it here for now. So I'm back here in the morning, and I got all the clamps off, and we're very well attached. So now my next step is to remove this last little piece of fretboard, and I'm going to do that by heating it up with the heater and prying it off with this. So we'll see where I go. So now that I've got the fretboard off, I'm using the chisel to clean up some of the glue that squeezed out, so I got a nice evenly sized cavity to fill. So once I get this all cleaned out, I can cut out a piece of wood to fit in our hole here and glue it in. So I got the slot cleaned out and squared up on both ends, and we've got this strip cut out that fits pretty snug. If I get it in there, it's real hard to get out. So what I'm going to do next is glue her up and clamp it up, give it some time to dry. I guess I'll see you then. Well, I got the our new skunk stripe installed. It's all glued up and all the clamps are off, and I've started trying to get it level to the rest of the board. Been using the little finger plane to plane it down, and having really good luck with that. I'm pretty much almost there. Just giving you a little update as to where we are.
Well, friends, I'm jumping right straight in the middle of Caleb's project here. Not because I don't think he can handle this, it's just because this is super complicated and we get one shot at it, and I've got more experience on this saw and than Caleb does. This is just awkward to hold, etc., etc. To give you an idea of what we're doing, we've got the neck clamped up to a block. This block is square to the table. We've also drawn a center line down through so that the neck is square this way to the table. So everything's square every direction you go. We have more or less scratched in a scarf joint line that we want to cut just on the other side of these holes through down to where the neck is the weakest. It's kind of bad. And then we're going to start back here, and we've got a line that we think we can follow also. So basically we're just cutting a big V scarf out of the back of the neck. And that's because the back of this neck has just got big chunks of wood out. It's a big hole anyway. It's never going to be strong unless we fill that with solid wood. Wish us luck, because this is going to be tough. Caleb's over here trying to help hold the guitar level, and I'm going to guide this in through the blade. Well, cut number one went really well. I think it went as good as we could expect it to go. Now we're going to have to turn things around so that we can cut from this direction back to cut number one. And then I think we'll show you a close-up of what we ended up with. Okay, we're just about ready to cut this side. Again, we have kind of a scratch mark here that we're going to follow. You can see probably all the busted out wood and all the mess that we're dealing with that we're cutting right through. This is the only way I can see to make this thing viable again without replacing the whole neck, obviously. So here we go. Well, that worked as good as it could work. Honestly didn't think we were going to get a result quite that good. Better than I was expecting, for sure. Now we only really have one break across this, and just so happened the wood filler that we put in on the other side actually spans that crack, so that helps hold that across that way. And now we're going to make a filler piece that we can put in here that will be solid. I think you can see how bad the piece is that we cut out of there. It was just no salvaging that. But this is solid. I was hoping we'd have solid, and it turned out we do. So here we go. Well, friends, I interrupt the video just to kind of give an update, give you my 2 cents on how the project is going that Caleb is working on. Give you a close-up look at it there. That's what the joint looks like. As you can see, we've cut away almost all that neck. This is the part we cut out, and you can see we cut out the part that should be cut out. There's nothing there of any value. It was missing chunks of wood, as you can see. Just really a horrendous piece of stuff. So by cutting all that out now and getting it square and flat, we can now cut a good joint out of this and fill in that area. We used what we had on hand. We've got mahogany here. It is a mahogany neck, so it should match reasonably close. But we didn't have a piece of mahogany that was big enough to fill the whole joint. So we did a glue up. I think it's important to talk about this because if you were going to try to fix your instrument, I want to tell you why we did what we did. And I think it would help you in making your decision to fix your instrument better. It's actually better to have a glue up like this than to put a solid piece of wood in there. The solid piece of wood has all of the grain going the same direction, and it will have flex to it because of that. This has all the grain running in opposing directions. In fact, and I'm exaggerating, the grain on this goes a little bit of a curve, the grain on this side goes a little bit of a curve. We've got them opposing each other. This one in the middle actually is cut sort of quarter sawed. By the way, the grain is quarter sawed. It's running up and down through the wood. One in the middle is actually on a 45. So all of those different things make this a very stiff glue up once you glue this up. So when you cut it down to a small piece, it will still be very stiff compared to a solid piece of wood. So that's the reason we did that. Even if we had a solid piece of wood, I probably would have laminated it, because making plywood, and that's basically what we've done here, is much stiffer than solid regular wood. I just wanted to tell you that also Caleb has done 90% of this on his own, with direction from me, of course. I only got involved in 10% of it, and that was, I actually did, as you saw on video, cut the joint. And I did take over for just a time savings factor on flattening this out. After you cut it with a saw, I don't care how good you are, even if you had a fence, the saw blade does this. I mean, microscopically, it's just not flat. So we wanted it really good and flat so we could get our best possible glue up joint. And I gave him direction to go ahead and flatten that out, but there was kind of a little underbow in here. And so I thought it was kind of humorous. I handed him these finger planes earlier, and I asked him to level off this with the finger planes. And I think he found that was not quite as easy as it looks on video. What do you think about that?
It's definitely a lot harder than you make it look.
It's an acquired skill. I would venture to guess that, at least 9 out of 10 of you out there watching would not be able to even maybe make a chip with this. And I know that maybe sounds like a big talk, but seriously, people come in my shop all the time and I say, well, here, try it. You just go ahead and it's just like the brakes going. You push it down and nothing happens, and it's just like, well, how do you make that cut? It won't cut. It's an acquired skill, trust me. And so because of that, and I'm doing it for so long, that was the quick way to flatten this out, believe it or not, is with this. And so I took over there and flattened it out, because it's much faster than even trying to do it with a file or sandpaper or all that. So those are the only 2 things I did, was I flattened this out a little bit and I made that cut. But he did everything else. He filled this joint, and I wanted to tell you about the joint too. We filled that with oak, and that is, again, is quarter sawn oak, and that oak is going, the grain is going this way down through the piece, which also stiffens that neck quite a bit. Now, granted, we are going to cut this back out, and I say he is going to cut this back out, and he is going to put in a truss rod also. And mostly because I want him to get the experience of making his own truss rod and threading it in a whole bit. And also it's not easy to cut a groove down the middle of a neck like this, because you don't have anything really straight to go by. You either have to do it by eye, or you'll have to rig something up to keep yourself straight, or even possibly with a circular saw or something like that. I mean, to get a straight line, because a router just riding down through there is not very easy to keep a straight line. So that's going to be a challenge that he's got to, get over yet too. But I just wanted to give you that update and give you a little more inside detail of what's really going on here. This is a difficult neck repair, and I figured, by the time he gets through this, he'll have all kinds of experience. And he's doing a real good job. I'm real happy with what he's doing so far.
So we got our block cut down in the same shape as the part we've cut out, and I've shaved it down a little bit so it fits nice and snug. I've already test fit it with the clamps on, and I can't see any light through it, so it's not got any big gaps. So I'm ready to start applying glue, and I got my paintbrush so I can dab some on and move it around. So now that I got all my glue on, I'm ready to clamp it up, and I'm going to start on the ends so I can try to keep my center line on the block kind of centered in the neck. I got all my clamps ready. So I'll get these on and show you what it looks like. So you can see I got all the clamps on, and if you look right there, you can see I got a good amount of squeeze out all the way around, and now I can take my damp cloth and start cleaning up what came out. I think we'll be pretty good for a while. So the clamps have been sitting up overnight, and I think we're ready to take them off. So at this point I could carve the shape of the neck, but I think what I'm going to do is leave it nice and flat on the sides, so we might be able to use it as some kind of guide when we route our new truss rod slot. So I think the next thing to do is figure out how we're going to do that and then get that underway. I'll show you what we decide. So what we decided to do on the guitar was use the router to route our truss rod slot. The problem was we didn't have the right router bit, so Jerry's running to the town to get a new router bit, but while he's gone, I'm gonna start pulling the frets on this fretboard. I don't know if you can tell, but they are really filed and really flat, like flat as the table flat. I'm gonna start pulling them, and we've already pulled this one here, and it seemed to come out pretty easily, so get the rest of them out, and maybe I'll bring you back at the end. I'm just about done pulling out the last of the frets. I thought I'd let you see how I'm going about it. Just taking little nips at a time, working my way up the fret to minimize the amount we tear out. Done there, and I thought I'd show you the frets. You can see, if it'll focus, how flat these are. There's no height left. They've been ground down to basically nothing left. Now we'll just wait for the router bit so we can put our truss rod in. So we've got our guitar and our jig. We're getting ready to route our truss rod slot. Got the bit and this jig set up so that we'll run straight down the center. I'm gonna get safetied up and I'm gonna route this thing. I'll show you where we get. Well, I'm ready to start. Out and see how I did. So you can see we cut our slot, and you might notice it looks a little bit off. Part of that is that my fill wasn't down the center of the neck because their truss rod wasn't down the center of the neck. And part of that is after we cut it, we found out that the base, the router base, was slightly off, so the bit itself didn't cut exactly straight down. It favored one side, so we're just slightly off center, but we've pretty much decided it's gonna work. I've already got my truss rod made for it, so my next step is going to be to cut out the slot for my stop piece, drill the hole through this piece here so I can feed the adjustable part into the body. So I'm gonna decide how I'm gonna do that, get right on it. So I've got my truss rod actually fitting really well. I carved out the slot so that it fits in there and it drops in and it fits pretty well. Pretty much done for that today because it's just about quitting time, and I figured I'd work on something that would take overnight to dry. So on the inside of the guitar, let me show you. Get the camera to really look at it. There you can kind of see there's a brace that's broken, and I'm going to try to clamp that up. It's right in there. You can see the big space in there. I'm going to try to get that clamped up real quick, glued up tonight, so by the morning it'll be ready to go. And I'm going to use a couple of these backwards clamps, I guess, on the center section and in here. And then I'm going to wedge this on the side where it's wedged, where the brace is wedged, so I can just wedge it up in there, and then I'll have some pretty good pressure on the brace. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to leave it for the night. We should be good by the morning. So I'm just about ready to put my truss rod in, and it fits in the slot really well. So now that it fits in the slot, I started working on a filler piece to go over top of it, and this is my first try, and it fits in the hole. The problem was it's a little loose, and you can even see here it's got a lot of play. So I went back and made another one, and this one's a lot tighter. It's a lot tighter, and now it doesn't move at all. So the next step will be to glue this in. And to do that, I'm going to have to be very careful to get glued just on the sides so that I don't glue the truss rod down. So that's what I'm going to do next. So here we are, all clamped up. I've got quite a few clamps on there, and we're still sitting pretty proud of the rest of the neck, but that's okay because I can shave it down. Also on the bottom side, you can kind of see here, I've got leather on all the clamps so I don't dent any of the finish or the wood. While I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to put some epoxy in here to solidify this, and then it should all be dry about the same time. Good and ready to go. Alright, I'm getting to it. So we all dried up. I've been working on this for a while, getting it nice and carved flat. And I think, if you can see, I'm just about there. It's looking pretty flat across. So I think I'm going to stop on this for now. Maybe take a good look at it before we glue the fretboard on. But the next step is going to be carve this neck, so we can get rid of this big old block.
We're getting ready to knock off some of this extra heavy wood here, and Caleb and I are looking at it and trying to decide the best way. We're over at the smaller bandsaw with the 1/4-inch blade. This just happens to be a brand new blade, so I thought that would be a good choice for one thing. And in addition, it doesn't have the big fence on the front so that we can get in closer before this part of the guitar hits the fence. This just gives us enough clearance. We've got this strap button on here, by the way. We can bump into this and it will protect the guitar. We put a piece of wood on here and rounded off the corners because the neck itself right here is actually going to be rubbing on this, because we want to keep it as flat on here as we can, because the blade will constantly be pulling you down. So you don't want to be cutting in the air if you can avoid it. So that's why we've taken time and made a new table here and rounded it off and smoothed it off with the sander. So here goes nothing. We'll see what happens. I'm going to cut the first side and then we'll let Caleb do the other one. Okay, you can see you can only cut so close. You know, I had to just try to leave air between the side of the guitar and this, so that's about as close as I felt comfortable getting. You know, when you look at it flat on, it's pretty close. You know, so that you can see the blade was traveling pretty close to the peg head and pretty close to the neck, but yet we didn't touch it. And that's Caleb's challenge here. Believe it or not, that's not that easy to do, to cut that close without actually bumping into this, because that's a sharp blade and it's very easy to push this thing. He did a very good job. A little minor touch there. And I mean, it's just a touch. It's not even really through the finish. So it's not a big deal. And we're going to have to refinish this area anyway because there's a crack in the peg head. It's not a big deal. We can sand that right off. So he did a good job. Got very close. Got just as close as I did. Did a very nice job.
So now what we're trying to do is take a little bit off thick parts so that it won't take us so long to take it down to the right size. You see, Jerry already started on this side, and what I'm going to do is try to pretty much match it closer to our final shape so we don't spend all day filing and rasping.
I took over there a little bit more to just knock off some more. I felt like I had a feel for that and knowing where we could take off a little bit more. And we could be more aggressive here. There's no question about it. I know I could take off a lot more with the saw yet. But on the other hand, he needs to learn the skills of using several rasps. By leaving a lot more on here, then he can go through the different rasps that I have and learn the different feel for each of those rasps, and he won't be in any danger of hurting anything. I think it's going to be a good learning experience to carve this down, hopefully to a shape that you just can't even feel. That would really be awesome. So here we go.
So I've been carving away for a little while. I've been using files and some little rougher rasps. You can see all the roughness on this where I started. But I worked my way down to this little one. It's a whole lot finer, as you can see. But I'm starting to get it into a shape that I like. But it's taking form, so I'm gonna keep at it. So I got it all carved. You'd be hard pressed to feel the transition. So I'm gonna start dyeing. I got my glove on and I got this leather dye. I got light brown here and dark brown over there. I think I'm going to start with the light brown just to be safe. it's got more red in it, and there's a little bit of red in here. So that's what I'm gonna start doing. Here's where I'm at so far. I've got the piece we put in dyed. It's showing up a lot more bright, a lot more red on camera. But in person it's pretty close. It's a little more red than I would have liked, but I'm not sure how much closer I'm gonna be able to get it. So I've got it dyed. We put some filler in the spots that needed it, and it's dyed, and we've got a thin layer of lacquer over it to hopefully keep everything about the same color we're gonna be in. So I think one of the next steps is let it dry and see what it looks like. Well, I thought I'd give you an update as to where I was on this formerly headless Austin guitar. I've been applying coats of lacquer for the last while. Now I'm sanding them back, get everything flat. I don't know if you can see, maybe if I zoom in, you might be able to see the spots where it's still shiny. The spots where it's still shiny after I've sanded over are obviously the low spots. So I'm trying to make it all the same height. And some of this is sanding, and then I go back and I'll put a few more coats of lacquer on, and then I'll come back and try to even it out again. It's a real repetitive process. So an update on this Austin guitar that I've been working on finish. I am currently sanding off most of what I put on. The problem we were having was I was using a rattle can, and it's just been too humid. We've been picking up a whole bunch of moisture. So it's been, I don't know if you can see it, but there's bubbles in here where it's picked up moisture in the finish. So I am currently sanding them out. What I'm planning on doing next, as soon as I'm done sanding here, is I'm going to use the real air gun and lacquer and a little lacquer retarder to hopefully avoid getting any of the extra moisture in there. So that's the plan. I'm getting to it. So here's where we are on the formerly headless Austin. I've got the whole neck sanded up to 1200. It's starting to look like a nice satin finish. But before I go any further, you can see the headstock, I sanded it too. It's time to glue the fretboard back on. So I'm gonna scrape some of this finish I oversprayed off, get the glue on there, and clamp the fretboard down. I'll get to it. Minor change in plans. Before I put the fretboard on, I've started putting the frets in because Jerry said it was easier to put the frets in before the fretboard went on. This way we can clamp it down flat so I don't have to worry about putting pressure somewhere it doesn't need to be. So I thought I'd show you how I'm doing this. What I do is I take this piece of fret wire and this tool here, and this way I can trim the tang off. That way we cut the bottom part of our T out. I'll see if I can show you. There, you can see the part I cut out. And that's so it'll go over the binding on the sides. So once I've done that, I start to stick it in the hole. I see how long I need, and I grab my flat cutters, come up behind, grab it. That's how long the fret slot needs to be. I trim that. Then when it's cut to length, I take it back to the trimmer to trim the other side tang off, and then it should fit in the slot, Start it with the mallet. Come back with the aluminum. There we go. So I've got all the frets in. I filed the sides down just a little bit. They're not quite finished, but it's good enough to put the fretboard on. So I've already got 2 pins in. I'm not sure if you can see them. You can see it right there. And those are basically indexing pins so that once we get the fretboard on here, there's already holes on the back that they fit into so it doesn't slide. Because once I start putting glue on there, it's going to want to slide around a lot. I'm ready to put some glue on. Here I go. Here we are, all clamped up, glued up. I've already cleaned up all the squeeze out. It's looking pretty good. I'm gonna leave it like this to dry. Probably touch it again in the morning. So now that the fretboard's glued on, I've been going down and rounding the ends of the frets. And the way I'm doing that is I've got the crowning file, and I'm just on the corners, working my way around it. that rounds them off pretty good so you don't catch, because I can feel when I run this way, I barely feel the frets, but as soon as I get to the ones I haven't done, I got sharp edges. So I'm going down the fretboard and rounding them off. Just about in the final stretch with this Austin guitar. Putting the tuners back on now. And on these lowest two tuners, I did have to re-drill the holes for them because our scarf joint here covers up the holes. I did that by hand, and I was just real careful about getting it straight. That'll let me get these tuners back on. Something else I've done off camera was I've got the nut and the saddle cut out, and they're oversized right now, but they're rough cut, so we're getting into the home stretch. So the bridge is on the guitar, and the two E string slots are started so that we can start to figure out the heights. But before I can do that, I needed a set of bridge pins. So we went and dug around and found this set of black with white dots that I'm going to use. But before I use them, I'm going to shave just the end off so it's got the nice angle for the ball end to set in. Well, I thought I'd share it with you. This is the first time all the strings are on it. The slots and the nut are not quite cut deep enough, and some of them that are close are far too deep, so we're going to have to take the top off. All the strings are on it. Let me show you kind of what I'm doing. I'm working on the G string right now. I'm going to take this pick, push it up underneath. Still got some space. So that G string still needs to come down just a bit, and also it's not up to pitch. So the G string needs to come down a little bit more, so I'll loosen it up. It also sounds like it's binding in the nut just a little bit, just a lot of bit. So I'll take the file and open it up some. Before I put the G string back in, I'm going to take a little bit off the top because it's getting a little deep. We don't want to let them get too deep because it makes it really difficult to file out the grooves, on top of several other reasons. It's still a little deep on that G string, but we're a little closer. Well, I'm going to file a little bit, and then I might show you where we're at. The eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed I forgot to do something. I'm now going back and leveling the frets. We noticed once we had strings on it, we had a few that were a lot higher than the others. We've got some high spots towards the middle, around the 11th and 12th, and on the end. This end is a lot lower, and in here's a lot lower, so I'm trying to focus on the higher areas and get it evened out. So now that the frets are level, I'm cleaning up between them with the razor blade. I'm just taking it and getting my fingers real close to the edge so it's nice and stiff, and running back and forth. And that cleans out any of the gunk and a little bit of the divots. Cleans it up real well. After I get done cleaning it out, then we can put some oil on it, and then it'll make it look a lot better. Well, all the strings are on it. It's set up to play. We're in tune. It's got a couple problems on the bass side, really, more than anything. You can hear that. We still have one high fret. And we were talking about, there was probably a way we can fix that. But on top of that, we're a little sharp on the intonation. Something else we're maybe not going to worry about right now, seeing as this was my training guitar, but something we could fix. So it's not perfect, considering where we started, in two pieces, and we're back to one piece that holds the strings. I think I did pretty good. It is just my first one, and it makes a sound. So now I guess I'm going to play it a little bit and let you hear how it sounds.
Well, friends, Caleb finally finished up his first project. And when I say finally, I mean it only took 3 weeks. I mean, it's not that big a deal. If I was charging 80 bucks an hour and all the hours he put in on this, it'd probably only be $2,400. It wouldn't be that much. It's worth that, I think. I'm being silly, but yeah, he had to learn, but he learned a lot of things. I mean, pretty much every skill that you can run across working on an instrument came into play on this thing. You know, he did a nice job repairing the neck. That's probably the best thing on the thing. The neck turned out great. You can barely tell it. A little bit mess up on the color match there, but not too bad. I think what happened that we sanded through the finish as we were putting it on, and then I suggested that he dye that back, and I don't think he got quite enough dye on it. But other than that, the neck thing was just about perfect. The nut is made real well. The antler saddle turned out real well. I would say the biggest negative is that we have a little issue on the frets here. There's a little bit of a high spot, but that was his very first fret job, and you know, it just takes it's a learning curve, you know, and learning how to drive them all in there and how to keep them down too. Sometimes they just don't want to stay down, you know. All things considered, it turned out pretty good. But because there is, this big screw up here on the back, because of that, I'm going to punish him. He doesn't know this yet, but he's being punished because, I can't live with a screw up like that on a real customer's guitar. So his punishment is he has to keep this guitar and play it forever. It's his guitar now because I want him to be able to remember that screw up, and then that way he won't do that on a customer's instrument. So there you go. It's your guitar. I hope you enjoyed Caleb's first project, guys. Thanks for watching.